Ah, we're live.
Okay, here we go again. I don't know how much of that you heard, but this is the 26th anniversary of DeForest Kelly's passing, and I just want to be sure that we resurrect him tonight so that we're left only with happy memories at the end of it. My first question people usually ask me is, how did you meet Dee? And the answer to that question is he was going to be in a parade in Wenatchee, Washington, and I was a Star Trek fan. And so I just said, I'm going to drive over there and see if I can watch him go by in the parade. And I went over there, and as luck would have it, the limousine that was going to carry Dee and Carolyn, his wife, in the parade was parked beside the road. And I went, if I loiter shamelessly, maybe I can actually meet him and not just watch him go by. So I did that. And pretty soon, he and Carolyn come out and they get into the vehicle, and they didn't go right away. They just sat there. And now I was a DeForest Kelly fan before Star Trek. And so I was aware of his bad guy roles and his heavy, badass cowboy roles in westerns. And I was not sure for sure if I was going to get Dr. McCoy or one of his rowdy cowboys, a killer. When you meet an actor, when you think of actors, you don't know really who they are. You've seen their personas, their characters and stuff, but you really don't know what they're going to be like at all. So I hung back because I don't like to be disappointed. And I had been disappointed by actors in the past. So I hung back and I watched him interact with the other fans in the crowd, and he was just so gentlemanly and so genuinely interested. Those of you who don't know much about Dee's career other than Star Trek, he had a 20-year career before Star Trek ever happened. And so he became an overnight a sensation kind of with Star Trek. And he was also raised right. He was always raised to be very appreciative of everything that ever happened to him. So when I met him, it was like he sees me and he really, really is appreciative. He was just like the most gentle, kind, soft spoken Southern gentleman, not at all like rowdy cowboys. And so I just went home in this cocoon of affection for him. There's a little more of that story. I'll let you read it in the book. But on the way home, I thought I'm a writer. And so for a creative writing assignment, I wrote an article. You'll love it. Very original, called The Real McCoy. And in it, I told the story of meeting Dee. And my teacher, my English teacher, said to me, that is a really, really good story. Why don't you send a copy to Mr. Kelly? And I went, I don't write to TV stars, And he says, well, look, if you impress somebody as obviously as he impressed you, wouldn't you want to know? And I went, yeah, but he's an actor. He probably hears it 10 times a day. And he basically pulled rank on me. And, you don't not do what teachers say because they can write you down in their citizenship or listening to, So I sent it, and it was really, really close to summertime. So I really didn't expect any kind of a response. Plus, I figured his secretary would see it. She'd go, oh, that's cute. And, deep six it, put it in the circular file. But as it turned out, Carolyn, his wife, was his secretary. And she read it and she went, Dee, you got to look at this. And so he read it, and they were so impressed with it that they actually submitted it. They sent it to Pat Langdon, who was Leonard Nimoy's Girl Friday, and asked her to submit it to a magazine, a New York magazine called TV Star Parade. And when they accepted it, Dee wrote me a letter to say, I just wanted to let you know we were so impressed by your letter that we submitted it, and I want to use it as a special holiday piece. Is that all right? You could have peeled me off the ceiling. I was so blown away by the fact that my favorite actor, had launched my writing career. So I wrote to thank him for that. When the magazine article came out 6 months later, my big concern as a writer is the publisher's going to change it. I won't even recognize it. I will be embarrassed that my name is on this thing. And when it actually came out 6 months later, not a word had been changed. So it kind of reminded me that, holy cow, you really can write. You may live in the sticks, but you can write, So I wrote to thank him for that. And they wrote back and said, gee, I hope this makes you a celebrity in your own right in Cle Elum. And being a writer, I had about 25 pen pals at the time. And I was going to write back. And Mom says, Kris, the man has been very kind to you. Don't become a pain in the butt. And I figured she was right. So I stopped writing. Fast forward, I got to see where I am in the book before I do anything else. Yeah, okay. Fast forward 16 or 18 years, and DeForest Kelley is going to be at the Star Trek convention in Spokane. By this time, I have taken that little encouragement from them and really gone to town and written things and had things published. So I thought I owe him a long overdue thank you for having launched my writing career. And so I sent him this silly little note. I owe you a long overdue hug. And immediately I went into the teenage mode, like, that was a dumb thing to say. You shouldn't say that. Scared myself almost out of going. But I had a 10-year-old nephew named Philip who was a Star Trek fan, and he wanted to go. So I went ahead and we went over there, but we were in a KOA campground because I didn't have a lot of money. And unbeknownst to me, Dee and Carolyn were looking for me all that weekend because I had sent them a letter saying, I owe you a long overdue hug. And I took a copy of the original article to him, hoping that maybe he could sign it if I did have the lucky chance of being able to live long and prosper.
Indeed.
Of having him, actually meeting with him again. So we're in a KOA campground. Oh, I know. We went into the lobby pretty quickly in the Star Trek convention site and said, we would like, can you get a note to Mr. Kelley for me? And he said, no, we can't do that. Oh my gosh, everybody wants to get a note to their favorite actor. We just can't do that. And I understood. Unbeknownst to me, Dee and Carolyn were calling that hotel and other hotels in the area trying to find me to connect with me because they really did want to reconnect with me. And I'm like, I didn't know this. So he didn't appear until the third day of the convention. And when he showed up, there were 3,000 people in the audience. And they were all absolutely rabid, jumping up and down and raising their hands and asking questions. And at one point, about 40 minutes into his presentation, I saw him look at his watch, and I thought, if you don't do it now, you'll never get to do it. Do it. And I raised my hand. He did not recognize it. He told me later he did not recognize me. But for whatever reason, fate, he said, yes, you. And I said, I just wanted to thank you for launching my writing career. And he goes, are you Kris? And I went, yes. And he said, well, let me tell you about this girl. And he starts talking about how we met all these years ago. I'm flipping out, And this Phil Donahue type comes up to me and puts a microphone in front of my face, and I'm speechless. I just don't even know. Expecting me to say something. So I finally whispered into the microphone, can I give you a hug? Hoping no one else would hear it. And he said, you bet, get up here. So I jumped up on the stage and I gave him a hug. And I said, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And he says, don't lose touch. Stay in touch. And I went, okay. Met him once more briefly right after that appearance. And then that was the last time. Oh, no. Okay. And then a day later, the convention is over. And I'm standing in the lobby, this huge lobby. People are leaving, and I'm at one end of this lobby talking to a computer programmer, and all of a sudden I hear this huge fan intake of breath. Somebody goes, there he is, and I looked over, and Dee and Carolyn were as far away from me as you could get at the other end of this huge lobby. And I went, oh, wow, and I thought, I was standing there going, and Dee looks across the lobby and goes, Kris. And that he and Carolyn start coming in my direction again. And I'm like, I don't believe this. So I felt, I have a responsibility. I'm like, move forward and met him halfway. And he said, do you remember Carolyn? And I said, oh, of course, And she gives me their address. She says, don't lose touch. We always wondered what happened to the little girl who wrote so well. So that began the pen pal thing that my mom said I shouldn't be doing. A little bit late, but it began. So that was the second meeting with him. By the time we got to Denver, and again, this is fan and star. I am starstruck at this point. I'm starstruck. Um, and we're in Denver, and it happens to be my birthday, and the person, a roommate that I'm with, her birthday. And Dee and Carolyn invite us to dinner. And I got to read this because it's absolutely the God's truth, every word. I wrote it as a stand-up comedy routine, but it was actually every single thing that was going on with my head. Because now I have to interact with this guy like as if I'm a real normal person, and I'm like, so it's called Happy Birthday to Me. 3 weeks after my birthday, Kat and I wound up in Denver and were invited via Sue to dinner with the Kellys. This was my first actual sit down and chat meeting with them. And I was so nervous that before we headed into their suite, I pleaded with Kat, sit right next to me, and if they ask me a question, you answer it. When you find yourself in an overwhelming situation like this, you want to be at your best. You want to make a good impression. Above all, you do not want to come across looking like Garfield's little buddy Odie. But you also don't want to come across looking as if you're having an audience with the Pope. So something right in the middle seems about right, but I was nowhere certain that I could handle a middle of the road approach. So I was nervous. No, I was petrified. I followed Jackie, Kat, and Sue, all of whom were cool, calm, and collected by all appearances, into the Kellys' hotel suite where we were to meet. And I managed, for a moment, to present myself as normal. I hugged Mrs. Kelly and said hello. Then I went over and shook hands with Dee. So far, so good. Alas, how quickly I went downhill from there. We stepped over to the couches and prepared to sit down. Dee asked us if he could take our coats. Now, if anyone else on the planet had asked me that question, an easy answer would have been yes or no, right? I mean, he wasn't asking my opinion on whether the U.S. should get out of the United Nations. He was just asking if I cared to give up my coat for a while. I gave it serious thought. I thought, what does he want me to say? Should I say yes? Will he be upset if I say no? Finally, it occurred to me that he didn't give a fig whether I said yes or no, just as long as I said something so he could sit down. So I said no. That seemed to satisfy him, but not for long. Next, he wanted to know if we would like drinks. I don't drink. So naturally, I said yes. Well, I had just told him no on something else. I didn't want him to think I was a bitch. So I said yes. Then he wanted to know what I would have. Oh boy, he had me there. He was pitching these incredibly difficult questions at me, and I was unable to field them. Oh, whatever I finally decided, hoping that would end the interrogation, Mrs. Kelly probably recognized the fact that I had slipped into the much dreaded idiocy mode, a common affliction of fans, and she tried to help me out. She suggested that I try a DeForest Kelley. I looked at her and I thought, gee, that is a very generous offer. But then I realized I wasn't getting the proper picture. She explained to me that a DeForest Kelley was a drink known to all of fandom, except me, obviously. Fine, I'll have one of those. Well, after a couple of DeForest Kelleys, vodka and water with a twist of lemon, I felt calmer. No one had asked any other controversial questions similar to, can I take your coat, in quite a while. So I was just sitting back and listening and watching everybody talk and laugh and have a good time. Not much later, we went downstairs for dinner. Dee sat at the head of the table. To his right sat Sue Keenan, and to her right sat Jackie Edwards. To Dee's left sat Kat, then Carol and Mrs. Kelly, then me. There was nobody on my left for 100 miles. You need to know this. I quickly lost my nervousness sitting next to Carolyn because she is a doll, so nice and so much fun. She could calm a jackhammer. I know because she calmed me and I'm the greater challenge. We lost ourselves in some conversation about having both been raised in the state of Washington. At one point, I was explaining something to her in great detail, and a folder of Kris on my left sleeve popped me with a great deal of force, and I stopped in mid-sentence and turned around to my left, fully expecting to find a waiter or someone who had come along to ask me a question. There was nobody there. I panicked. I thought, okay, Kris, how are you going to handle this? Well, I had two choices. I could turn back to Carol and just continue the conversation as if nothing at all had happened, or I could explain what happened. Naturally, I opted for the truth, but I forgot to provide a complete explanation. Instead of what I just told you, I turned back to Mrs. Kelly and I said, strange. I could have sworn somebody just tapped me on the shoulder. Carolyn accepted this bizarre information calmly. She looked at and she looked at Jackie. Jackie looked at her. They both studied their salads for a while and said nothing. I'm amazed the Kellys didn't signal someone to bring a butterfly net. It took me over a month to remember all the stupid things I said and did at dinner that evening. I found it comforting at a later date to learn that other fans admitted experiencing similar difficulties the first few times they were faced with actually trying to communicate with the objects of their affection. So yeah, and I end up like at his bedside when he passed away. Like he's like family to me, but that's how it started. He was like, let's see. They encouraged me to move down to Hollywood because they said I was very creative and talented and I should get down there and start doing what I was meant to do. And so they started looking. I had an African serval cat, which is a knee-high so-called wild cat. He was born tame. He didn't know he was a cat, let alone a wild cat. But anyhow, I had him and I took him down there. Dee and Carolyn literally were knocking on doors trying to help people, I mean, a stranger coming up to your house and saying, we will allow a wild animal in your backyard. That's going to get a big fast no, but because it was Dee and Carolyn, they got a number of yeses. And eventually they helped me get into a place where I could have my cat with me. And then during the Star Trek ceremonies in 1991, Dee got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and they also got their hands in the Mann's Chinese Theater, handprints in the Mann's Chinese Theater. And what I want to do now is read the letter I wrote to Dee, because by this time, actually, I think I want to go somewhere else first. Mom and Dad had never met Dee and Carolyn. I knew them for 20 years before they ever had a chance to meet them. And they thought I was way over the edge on this mythical couple. And so they were really thinking I was, delusional. And they ended up being able to meet them. And they apologized to me for, oh my gosh, you're right. They are salt of the earth. They're absolutely, absolutely terrific. So, and then Dee and Dad, because Dad was a cowboy fan, a Westerns fan, Dee and Dad got into talking about his Westerns. And Dad said to Dee, I do not know how you managed to portray those SOBs that you portrayed in Westerns. Sitting here looking at you, he said, even your Dr. McCoy is crabbier than you are, and he said, sitting here, and my dad had a way with her, it's like nobody's business. Sitting here looking at you, you don't look like you could act at all. I thought that was hysterical. And Dee laughed. He thought that was great. We said, well, thank you very much. That's a very great compliment. So for the Star Trek ceremonies in 1991, Dee got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and invited us to attend it. And before that, his fan club president said, why don't we all write him letters of congratulations? And so I wrote him a letter of congratulations that I want to read now. The card that I sent Dee read, great men may be among us, but none compare to you. I had taped a few small photos of Dee and me, and Dee and Carolyn inside the card and had written, congratulations on your star and for remaining the wonderful person you are. Love, Kris. On the empty inside facing page, I had quoted the trailer from Star Trek VI. They have been our guides, our protectors, and our friends. Beneath that, I had written how very fortunate I feel. Most fans have had only the real McCoy, R-E-E-L McCoy. As all of the above, your caring has transformed me into someone worthy of being cared about. Thank you. God bless you. I love you. For the accompanying letter, I created a special letterhead on my PC. The heading was respectfully engraved, you deserve all of life's good things. You are one of life's good things. The letter read, Dear Dee, where do I begin? Your star ceremony affords me the opportunity to get really serious for once, because we were always doing crazy things, and to pour out to you all the love, pride, and respect you've engendered seemingly forever. So, what are the proper words to adequately express any of it? I'll try. Your skill as an actor is exceeded only by your skill as a wonderful human being. In a way, I wish I had met you first, in the way that I met Tippi Hedren, without knowing much or caring much about who you were as an artist. Why? Because it took me so long to get over seeing you chiefly as my favorite actor, with all of the accompanying jitters and shyness and paranoia that awesome perspective entails. It took a long time before I could genuinely relax in your presence and appreciate you as a real flesh and blood human being who is special despite what you do for a living instead of because of it. That's what I first responded to in Wenatchee in '68 upon scrutinizing you from the sidewalk before introducing myself, your genuine niceness. I stood fidgeting on the sidewalk, gauging whether or not you were going to disappoint me if I approached you for an autograph and a smile. My initial fear was, do I really want to risk being turned off by an actor I really love to keep on liking? It had happened before. Well, after studying the situation for several long minutes, it became abundantly clear that you and Carolyn were very nice people. So that's when I gathered the courage to step forward and open my mouth and hope my heart wouldn't leap out of it and on the floorboard of your convertible. You deserve the star, and I mean this in the old-fashioned way. You deserve the honor to the degree for which stars were originally bestowed, not in the way they are too often awarded nowadays as a publicity gimmick. Your career has spanned, don't say ouch, nearly 5 decades. You're genuinely one of Hollywood's decent, honorable guys. There might be 4 or 5 others, but their names escape me at the moment. You do good deeds quietly, which makes them even gooder. You're a gentleman star who's an accomplished and convincing badass only in the movies. You meet, exceed, and annihilate the criteria for being awarded an old-fashioned star. In fact, I can easily envision you being named Man of the Year. No problem, no exaggeration, no stretch of the imagination. I think the creator, the real big bird of the galaxy, delights in you and sees you in the same way he sees Yosemite or a healthy new bud on a rose bush, as a damn fine piece of workmanship, if he does say so himself. I don't know what else to say, how else to express how proud I am of you, how lucky I feel to have fallen for you, how blessed I am to know you well enough to know that I'm right about all of the above. You are an inspiration to me. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. In 1995, my mother was diagnosed with a fatal brain tumor and went through all kinds of chemotherapy and surgeries and stuff to try to stave it off for as long as we could do that. And Dee and Carolyn wrote them letters and dropped them cards. And when she went to the hospital, they would sign a letter of him in scrubs saying, okay, he would sign a photo of himself in scrubs saying, if they give you any trouble, you know who to call. And all of the doctors were flipping out over the fact that Dr. McCoy knew their patient and were asking me, would you mind, could you get me an autograph of Dr. McCoy? That would be awesome. So, and Dee was very, very happy to do that. He always signed them to whatever the doctor's name was, to Dr. Pierce, the real R.E.L. McCoy from the R.E.E.L. McCoy, DeForest Kelley.
Kris, you can put your water on that.
Okay. Okay, so, and at the same time, very shortly after Mom was diagnosed with brain cancer, Dee was diagnosed with another type of cancer that would eventually take his life. And he didn't want me to know because he felt I would feel torn between the two. Where should you be? Where should you be? And he just kept his mouth shut, wouldn't let me know. And at about this time when he would do conventions, he was beginning to think, this was actually before he was diagnosed, but the older you get, the more you think about, how much time do I have left and this kind of thing. And he wrote a really, really, in my opinion, a really poignant poem that Carolyn gave me permission to put in the book. And it's called, I don't know what it's called for sure, but it's called he wrote, time is really the blink of an eye. Where do they go, those who die? What is below? What is above? What is in store for those we love? All that's been written and all that's been said still does not answer. What happens to the dead? So some of his other non-Star Trek poems all had to do with, issues of life and death and life, things of that nature, So Mom and Dad met him. They fell madly in love with both Dee and Carolyn. Anytime I joke, when Mom gets sick, and she says to me at one point, I want Dr. McCoy as my doctor. And I said to her, no, you don't. And she goes, why not? And I said, his most famous line is, he's dead, Jim. And she goes, but if he had a spark of life, if that patient had a spark of life in them, he would have pulled him back. And I looked at her and I said, are you a little starstruck? pulling the, okay. So then, now this is after Mom's being diagnosed. This one is DeForest Kelley in microcosm. It's called A Communion of Sorts. On March 27, 1997, Carolyn called to let us know that she and Dee would like to drive over to my place the following Saturday and visit with my folks and me, if that's all right. I said, it certainly is. And she giggled. I gave her careful directions because they'd only been to my new condo once before. They'd been to the one in Encino numerous times, but this is their first trip to my condo. Then she said, be sure your new kitties are on their best behavior and that they're looking good. I said, I can guarantee they'll look good, but best behavior, they're only 7 years old. They're only 7 months old, Carolyn. They don't have a best behavior unless they're asleep. And yeah, she said, they'll be fine. The Kellys visited with us for an hour and a half. Mom was wearing a turban on her head to hide the fact that her hair had grown back and mismatched colors and textures after her brain surgery. The hair was still patchy in spots. Instead of the silvery mane she had once enjoyed and been complimented on endless times, she said she looked like someone who would make babies cry in the supermarket. Despite the fact that the turban was warm and itchy, she insisted on wearing it when company was around her when she went out in public. The wig she had bought had long since been discarded as too hot, too scratchy, and too artificial looking. I was happy to see how good both Dee and Carolyn looked. Their regimen of walking 6 blocks daily had given them a look of such robust health that they both appeared radiant. Dee had gained weight too. The Kellys and Mom and Dad discussed their various health challenges. Carolyn bragged on Dee for having quit smoking. She said, we're both real Puritans now. Mom mentioned having developed a sweet tooth following chemotherapy. I never had it before. Carolyn said, I've developed a sweet tooth for that bittersweet chocolate Dee always gets. Dee leaned over to me and said, now you know where it goes, because I was the one usually getting them the chocolate. Dee told Dad that he was finished with acting. Dad told Dee, you're a hell of an actor. I never knew how good until I met you. I thought you'd be a real SOB. I told you this earlier about seeing those Westerns. Then he added, nothing against Star Trek, but you could barely get a word in with Shatner hogging all the time. Thank you. Dee threw his head back and laughed at that and then clarified in the 4th and 5th years we were supposed to get our due. Each of our characters was supposed to have episodes spotlighting them, but the 4th and 5th years never came to pass. They met the kiddies. As luck would have it, both of the little rascals had worn themselves out prior to the Kellys' arrival, so Ashley, the shy one, actually slept on Carolyn's lap while she stroked his long silky fur. Dee and Carolyn mentioned how wonderful Mom looked. She said, well, thank you. Then she said, I miss my hair. Carolyn said, don't worry, it'll be back, better than ever, maybe even curly. That's when Mom began her personal contribution to the visit. I don't normally do this except around family. It's pretty frightening to the uninitiated, but I feel comfortable with you. Let me show you how my hair is coming in. Then you'll know why I wear this turban. Slowly, painfully slowly, I thought, she pulled the turban from the top of her head, revealing the multiple colors of her hair and the remaining bare patches. I knew how much courage that took. I held my breath, knowing it might be a difficult moment for the Kellys, as sensitive as they were. Dee stood up at that moment and adopted a McCoy-like stance and authority, but he was still genuinely and authentically Dee. Then he walked over to where she was and said, "Yes, let's get a good look at you. It's time for your physical." Mom stood up. He embraced her and held her for a long moment. Then he pushed her gently out to arm's length, gave her the once-over head to toe, and proclaimed, "You are a beautiful woman, Dorothea, and you're going to be just fine." I never loved DeForest Kelley more than I did at that moment. Mom melted, hugged him again, and responded gratefully, "I know I'm going to be fine. I wish all you people would stop worrying about me." Then she joked, "I'm going to outlive all of you." Mom left the turban off a lot more after that visit. DeForest Kelley had told her she was beautiful and that she was going to be fine. And that was the only prognosis she was prepared to believe. And I saw so many other stories like that when he would be at conventions. This one gal, 35, I'm going to guess 35 to 40 years old, stood up in the middle of this group and said, "You don't know me from Adam." But as a teenager, I lived under a hellacious experiences. I didn't even want to be alive. So I adopted you as my father, Dr. McCoy. I adopted you as because I knew you were good. There was goodness there. And so, Dee's always very touched by stories like that. And then she said, "May I give you a hug?" And he stepped toward the stage and opened his door and he says, "Come to Papa." There wasn't a dry eye in the house, and there are just so many stories like that. He met you where you were. He always made you feel like you were the beloved. And I saw him deal with some pretty rough characters as far as fans go. And he just was extremely diplomatic. If he ever did correct you in any way, shape, or form, it never felt like a criticism or a critique. It felt like, "I think you're the best thing since sliced bread, and maybe you want to try this a little differently or that a little differently." You just never felt judged or, in any way less than. He always made you feel like you were a beloved human being. And another story, way before he ever became an actor, when he was about 17, he and his little gang of friends met this gal named Faye. I don't remember what her last name was, but she was about 17 or 18 years old, and they found out that she had cancer. Back in that day, they didn't know if cancer was, contagious, and they kind of basically said, "You got cancer? Yeah, bye." Scatter like fleas. She said, "No, we're going to give her the best 3 or 4 months she has left." And they stayed right with her and took her with them and went out with her and, did everything they could to give her the absolute best rest of her life that she could have. And so toward the end of his life, they called and Dee fell ill and they didn't have children. And all of their friends were about their age too. And they needed somebody to come in and help. And they asked me to come in, and actually through AC Lyles, they asked me to come in and help. And I felt so blessed. It was so scary because I'm not a nurse, I'm a good caregiver, but I'm not a trained nurse or anything like that. And it was very, very scary and sad and the whole 9 yards. But they just had such confidence in me that it made me feel like I was measuring up, And the last part of his life, although he was in the hospital, there was still so much funny stuff. This is a family-friendly show where I would tell you some of the things that are in the book that would absolutely have you falling off your chairs. Some of the conversations we had, but they're in the book. You won't miss them. And because we were just keeping each other's spirits up, it was a matter of, every so often he said, "I just can't believe it. When they're talking about terminal illness, I can't believe they're talking about me." And I said, "I don't see a tag on your toe. Just keep living," and he just wanted to continue to do conventions and do all kinds of stuff that he was no longer able to do. But he just kept talking about, and he said, and then he'd say, "Well, I was going to do this." And then my nurse reminded me that I'm a short timer. And I'm like, and at one point I had a nurse come in and say, don't give him false hope. And I said, that is not false hope to allow a person to be happy until they die. His affairs are in order. Everything's fine. He's got it all taken care of. His taxes are paid. His wife is well cared for and taken care of and provided for. Leave him alone. Let him be alive. So, yeah. What else? Are there any questions? Let me just stop here and ask if there are any questions, because I know, how much time do we have left? Yes, sir.
Well, I came in late. What was the convention where you first met him?
It was, the first convention was the Spokane Star Trek, the 20th anniversary Star Trek
I have
convention.
some friends who went to that.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. And then after that, after I got down to Hollywood and stuff, I believe it was after I got to Hollywood, and they really got to know me really a lot better than they had from letters and whatever. They knew we were on like limited incomes. Secretaries don't make a whole bunch of money, but they'd fly me to the convention. They said, the convention just won't be the same without you. And then Adam Malin and people who were running the convention said, you have to do something to D. And I said, what do you mean we have to do something to D? You have to get D. You have to get him. Because if you don't, we will make up something for you to get D with you. And it was just, trying to outfox. When Deacon, my servo was up at Shambhala, they had elephants up there. And elephants, when they go potty, they have these big balls of, it's mostly hay. It smells like hay, but it's elephant dung. And one of the things we did to Dee and Carolyn was I shellacked a big elephant dung and put it on a plaque and put, thanks for putting up with all our shit. Because we had been, really yanking each other's chains forever and ever. Another one, I'll tell you real briefly, I don't want to read it because reading is kind of boring, but for one Halloween, A.C. Lyles, who was the producer on, did you guys see Night of the Lepus, the Attack of the Killer Bunnies? That Dee did? Yeah, okay, well, it's a campy show. The special effects are so awful because sometimes the rabbits are as big as a drum, and sometimes they're big as a cow, sometimes they're big as a house. I mean, it's really hard to believe this thing. But, and I told Dee, I said, Dee, why did you do that movie? And he said, I'll tell you about Hoppy Halloween in a minute. He said, Kris, I'm telling you, the script was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And I went, really? And he goes, yes. He says, if you will close your eyes and just listen to the words, you will know how awesome that script was. And I said, he's the first actor I've ever heard of in my life who said, you shouldn't watch me, just listen. Okay, so because of that, one Halloween, my friend and I dressed up in the most god-awful, purposefully god-awful bunny rabbit outfits. We got we got leggings and put them on our heads so that the leggings did this, so they looked like ears. We put on men's DVDs over our clothes and put a bunny rabbit thing. And we were going to go up to Bel Air and get A.C. Lyles, who was the producer of this, and tell him we wanted to, as a joke, we were auditioning for the sequel to Night of the Lepus so we could be in a movie with Dee. As luck would have it, A.C. Lyles was out that weekend, and he was campaigning for George H.W. Bush back then. It's been a while, guys, okay? So Kat says, we invested in these god-awful costumes. We need to do something with these costumes. And I went, what? And he goes, let's do it to Dee and Carolyn. And I went, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to I will go to a strange neighborhood and make an ass out of myself, but I don't want to do this in front of a neighborhood where I quite often go there and have lunch or whatever. I said, no. And, she did the pouty thing. So I finally said, oh God, all right. And so we called them up and we said, we wanted to come by. I said, all right, yeah. And we get up to, and Kat had gotten Science Diet kitty kibbles. And we got up to their front door, knocked on the door in this god-awful outfit. And all of a sudden we heard the garage door open, and their house was configured to where you'd walk up, say, this is the front door. The garage was out this way and around here, so you couldn't see it. But I heard the garage door go up, and I'm like, this is ominous. And Dee comes around the corner, and he looks at us, and he gives us a McCoy scowl, and Kat has her science diet behind her bunny tail. She goes, oh, we're so excited to see you. And she drops the science diet all over his patio. And I'm thinking, God, I can't do this. And Dee starts to bend down to pick up. Then she goes, oh, no, don't worry, Dee. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Because he's pulling a Mad McCoy thing on us. He's not really mad, but I don't know this. He looks very not happy. And he goes, oh, no, you two get in the house. Get in the house right now. He didn't want the neighbors to see, So we go in the house. Carolyn's in there. Dee picks up the kitty litter or the kitty food. And he comes back in and Pat says, I'm sorry. And he goes, it's all right. It's taken care of. And he sits down, and Carolyn, of course, is looking at, she said, what are you doing? And we explained, we were going to do AC, but AC's not at home, and you're not going to leave us, and we're going to do this. We're sorry. And Dee looks at us, and he goes, you look a little bit like nuns. Anyhow. And we just had so much fun, I can't go longer on this story because it's a little,
Risque.
I would say risque, yeah. And this is, Weekly Volcano has presented this as a family-friendly show, but it's in the book. You'll get it. You'll get the whole story in the book. So, anything else? Any other questions? Walter, put you on the spot.
Oh, I have a mic.
Oh yes, we do have a mic. Now he's definitely got to come up with a question or a comment or whatever. Have you read the book already? Or
No.
Oh, okay.
I fell in love with obviously watching Star Trek, watching the movies.
Uh-huh.
And
Come up here. Do you mind?
Gosh.
Do you mind?
Sure.
This is Walter. I don't know his last name.
Lutch.
Lutch?
Lutch, yeah.
Okay.
Hi. I amusingly or ironically, my mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer and was in sort of a assisted living place for the last couple of years of her life.
Uh-huh.
And one of the last presents that she got me, she found Terry Leroux's biography of Dee, because we both loved Star Trek. We both, we watched it, and so I read that, and you just falling in love with this person who just seemed so authentically, classically good and kind and sweet. And it was exactly the kinds of things that my mother loved and cherished about life and about storytelling and about, actors and things like that. And so we got to have some of these conversations, before she passed about what I was reading. She didn't get a chance to read the book, but, I kind of paraphrased for her, etc. So, it's just as soon as I saw your event coming on, I was like, oh my goodness, how lucky am I to be in Tacoma and to just be able to come by and see this. I think as far as a question, I'm fumbling so much. I mean, I am.
Stay in touch, and if you have any questions afterwards, let me know.
Definitely. I have always been curious, in terms of reading through I've read all the autobiographies and biographies of the different actors of the original series for Star Trek. And of course, Bill has his take on things, and then everyone else has their perspective. But what did, as far as conversations you might have heard around the house with Dee and Carolyn, how did it come across to people that he sort of let into his home and would
The
speak
strange
to?
thing about it, after Terry wrote her book, she said, you don't have to go. She said, none of the Star Trek actors ever made it into their home. That was their sanctuary. I was one of very, very few people who ever came into their house because they didn't consider me Hollywood, as far as how Dee got along with his co-stars, everybody universally loved Dee, and he loved them. I mean, he was very, very honest, but even in his honesty, he was very compassionate, understanding, and benign. He said, people always ask him, "What do you think of Bill Shatner?" And he said, "I love Bill. I've had to straighten his ass out a time or two." You know, that kind of thing. He always told the truth, but he also always said, the one thing he said to me it's in the book, but during the time he did discuss Bill was that he felt sorry for him because he said he has such adulation. It doesn't seem like he really understands it, you know, and he felt like he was insecure or something, and that like, almost any day now the fans are going to find out that I'm not awesome, you know. And if somebody loves you, they love you. You don't have to be necessarily awesome. You just have to be their kind of awesome, you know. And I don't and he never really, you know, he did that book, Get a Life, you know, he and then when Bill Shatner actually went incognito to a Star Trek convention where nobody knew who he was in costume. And that's when he fell in love with Star Trek fans. But this is 30 years later, because he realized what Star Trek fans are. They are, you know, the infinite diversity and infinite combination type folks. One of my best, I guess, lessons from being in the Star Trek world is before I went to conventions, if I saw somebody in a wheelchair, I would kind of like not look at them because I didn't want them to think they were being looked at, you know. And I thought, yeah, it felt uncomfortable to me to look at somebody like, you know. And then there was this gal, a Star Trek fan, and she was in a wheelchair, and she said, you know, I was going to do the costume contest, but I didn't know whether to come as Captain Pike or a Horta. You know, and I realized these are human beings. These are, you know, they want to be seen and heard, just like the rest of us want to be seen and heard. And so for me, from that point on, it's like I see somebody in a wheelchair, I say, hello, how are you? You know, and whatever. But I just had this thing about don't look at anybody who's in any way really particularly different because they might think you're looking at them for wrong reasons, you know? And so the Star Trek folks was like this multicolored universe of everybody. And it was just so welcoming and friendly. And I don't know what it's like today. I do not know what it's like because they're so expensive anymore. Couldn't even get into them, I don't think. But back in the day when you had to earn your way to the front seat, you got to sit with the other fans, you know, from 2 a.m. to 8 when they opened the doors and get to meet people. Star Trek fans are some of the coolest people on the planet, you know. And Shatner didn't get that. But I have to say, where Shatner and Nimoy were involved, they really did have some pretty weirded out fans. Dee and Carolyn Dee appeared to attract fans who were very much like him and not threatening and whatever. Whereas Shatner and Nimoy literally needed bodyguards. They needed bodyguards. So there's a story in here. Shatner was doing do we have to get out of here pretty soon or what? How are we doing? 7 o'clock. Okay, that's good. We got time. Shatner was doing a charity celebrity horse show auction, and Dee and Carolyn said, "Going out there, you know." And Dee said, "I will be there, but Carolyn won't because she had a foot problem." Carolyn said, "Yeah, going out there and giving him a hug." And so I got a bunny rabbit because I didn't do anything with Dee that I didn't also include Carolyn, and I bought her a bunny. So I could say, somebody missed you tonight, me, you know, so he could take it home to her to let her know I missed. But I was wearing my Divorce Kelly Walk of Fame jacket, and I walked up to this celebrity horse show, and they had this phalanx of security guards. I mean, they were like, you know, not dressed in Klingon. They were really dressed as security guards. And I'm like, oh, you know, and I said, is it okay if I see Mr. No, absolutely not, you know. Well, I was standing back there, and I could see every once in a while, Dee would like look around behind him as if he was maybe looking for somebody. And I figured it might be me since they had told me to come by. But every time he would do that and I would do this, the security guard would go right in front of me and block me. I mean, they were on me like fleas on a dog. They wouldn't let me make a move. So I thought, this is weird, because I'd never had that kind of non-access to Dee at any convention I had ever been at in my life. And I thought at one point, I'll just throw the bunny up and over and hope it, and I thought, no, they would arrest me. They would have me in the paddy wagon so fast. And it was really, really cold that year. I really wanted to go home. So finally, Dee gets up. I think she used the bathroom. Dee gets up and he turns around, and they saw him get up and turn around. And of course, they do the thing in front of me like this. And Dee starts up the stairs and he goes, "Kris, I've been looking all over for you." And of course, then the Missouri guards are like, okay, But that was the first time I really had come up with the idea that some people really do need that kind of security. But Dee didn't attract that kind of people. So that was cool. Anything else? Do you have a question?
Can you guys hear me?
No.
Oh, I haven't needed. That's fine.
Come on up.
Yeah, that won't work.
Come on up.
I didn't think you could read this yourself, so if I can. These people wanted to know what Dee would. I think it has to do with you taking care of him near the end.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, Dee made it a point to tell the attorney and the consultant, "I want you both to know that I trust Kris completely. She is completely honest and straightforward. If you have anything to tell me, you can tell me through her, and I will know I got the message exactly as you intended it. She's a gem, and I trust her with all my affairs." So my only question is,
Yes.
How did that happen?
I would like to know. Here's the interesting thing about it. I probably would not have written this book if not for the fact that Terry Rio, who wrote From Sawdust to Stardust, Dee at first gave me permission to write his biography, but I'm not a biographer. I'm an anecdotal writer. I am a storyteller. So the research, that kind of stuff, but he had given me all the information. He had given me people he had gone to school with, people he'd been in the military with, his friends, and he said, you can write the book and the biography. And I knew I couldn't. Terry Rio happened to be, Bill Moyer is a big fan of Terry Rio. And I knew she could do it. She had not met him, had always wanted to. I think a biographer should absolutely have an eagle-eye view of someone. I joke to them, man, if I write it, I'll inadvertently start a new world religion. I'm just over the moon, about you guys. And so she had that distance. And where were we going? The Terry.
Oh, just how they,
and
how he became.
And I ended up writing the book because she knew I was with him the last 3 months of his life in the hospital. She said, "Well, you were there when nobody else was, and I need to, cover that time." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "How did you go from being a fan on the outermost reaches of fandom to being at his bedside when he passed away?" And it threw me for a loop. I had no idea how that had happened. But because I was a journalist, I had 280 journals. I'm a writer. She says, I said, "I have no idea. You would have had to ask Dee that. That's something they would have had to decide to bring me into their lives. I didn't have a whole heck of a lot to do with that, She goes, "Oh, you know the answer. You just need to connect the dots." And so I went into all my journals, and every interaction we ever had, almost every interaction I ever had with anybody, I wrote it down and wrote about it. My life is, in journals. And so I was able to connect those dots. And then Terry said to me in a restaurant, of all the places to say this to me, a restaurant in public, she said, "Do you realize that you were the daughter they never had?" And I started to cry. Mm. And I said, "Don't say that." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Because if that's true, I didn't do enough." And he goes, you did absolutely everything they asked, didn't you? And I went, yeah. And he said, they wouldn't have accepted anything more, you know? And it just blew me away. And then I realized when you go through the book, you see all of these places where I'm thinking, my God, they're being kind to a fan. My God, they're being kind to a fan. And then when Terry started actually interviewing people who they had known since they were 18 years old with their friends and family and stuff, they were telling her, oh, they've called Kris a fan. They've called Kris a friend for 30 years. We've always known about Kris. We never met Kris, but they always called you a friend. And so for me, I guess I was insecure, and I kept thinking, why would they pick me? I mean, why would they do that, you know? And I guess because you end up, you know people in your life who you feel safe with. And I guess I felt safe to them. They didn't have to think, are they after my money? Are they after my, you know, even now to this day, like I went to a convention one time, and after I had written the book, and I was about to speak to the convention group. So I went to the auditorium ahead of time to familiarize myself with it so I feel more comfortable in there. And I was sitting in the chair, and I looked around, and there was this gal sitting over a little farther away from me, and she looked at me, and she's like, you know, she gave me the celebrity type thing, you know. And I looked over there because I thought somebody had come in, you know, I thought it was maybe Brent Spiner or somebody had come into the other part of the thing, and there was nobody there. And I looked back at her, and I realized she had my book in her lap, and she was giving me that celebrity thing. And I had a sense then of what they had to think and the kind of gatekeeping they had to do, and the fact that people put you on a pedestal. And I immediately called her over. I said, we need to be friends because I don't want to be thought of like that. I do not want to be on a pedestal. That, I mean, they kick pedestals out from underneath people, you know.
It's creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy.
And scary.
It's really, it's not pleasant to be, you know. So I guess maybe that was why, you know, they just felt safe. And the reason I really ended up loving them as much as I did is I felt safe, because at first I didn't. Again, I thought, is he Rowdy Cowboy? For a while, I thought they're being awful kind. I wonder if another shoe is going to drop and they're going to ask me for something else. You know, you have feelers out all the time. Are you safe? Are you safe? Are you safe? And at every single moment, the answer was yes, you are safe and you are beloved. And he made everybody feel that way. He just was genuinely a kind, loving, accepting human being. I miss that. You know, seems to be so little of that left in the world. And that's one of the things I miss most. But, you know, I have really good friends I feel safe with. You know, now I pick people based on, you know, are you safe? Because once you've met somebody who's safe, that's all you want. You know, that's your target. I want safe people in my life. So, anything else? If you don't have any more questions, we can probably, if you want to get books. Oh, by the way, if you get a book tonight, any book at all, you get Serval Sun for free. My book about having my Serval cat for free. And maybe almost any other book there. If you get a book, if you get like the DeForest Kelley book, I'll give you another one of the books there, you know, for free. But if you already have the D book, everything's on sale on that table right now from what you find at Amazon. So if you want to take a look there and see if there's anything you like. I'm moving to Costa Rica in September. So whatever money I make between now and then, I can't take those books with me to Costa Rica. I'm going to leave them here with Ed King's books. But whatever I make toward my trip to Costa Rica to get me and my kitty to Costa Rica, you know, if you want to make a donation back there for that, that would be super, super kind of you and super fun, but don't feel obliged to do that. And did you want to show the audience the code for if they want to do the Costa Rica thing?
Oh, where was that?
Could you bring me yeah. there's a link you can also go to donate if you're not here and want to do that. But these books that I've been talking about, you can get them on Kindle if you're not the one over there, the Costa Rica one. You can get them at Amazon. They are more expensive at Amazon. And so you don't have to get them here. But I encourage you to get them here because I'm trying to help King's Books too. They get a percentage. So.
Do you want to read that into the record?
Do I want to read that? Okay. For my final birthday this year, here in the United States, I'm seeking travel and relocation money to help get my kitty Charlie and me to Costa Rica in September 2025. I can't afford to stay here in the U.S. because I didn't earn enough money during my working career to get me very far post-retirement financially. And I think I'm going to live a while longer, so I need to move to a country that is way, way more affordable. Costa Rica is way, way, way more affordable. And I know Spanish. So to me, it'll be like, and it turns out a lot of my DNA is Latin and South America.
Can you say live long and prosper in Spanish?
I can say Star Trek in Spanish.
Sure.
Misión de los Estrellas. Vida. Nope, can't say live long and prosper yet in Spanish. Anyhow, if you'd like to help fund this, or even if you just want to let other people know about it who could help, the website URL is https://gofund.me/e3e d.
All right.
Did you want to put that up or something like that?
Camera.
And I don't know, Lisa, are you able to see any questions? Are there questions?
Yeah, there is one question. When you think of Dee and Carolyn, what are the first things that come to mind?
Joy, smiles, laughter, kindness, silliness, just all good stuff. All good stuff. I as I say, if you take care of somebody who is terminally ill, the last part is difficult and it's hard because you're going to lose somebody that you dearly, dearly care for. But before very long, all of the stuff that made you love them so and will make you miss them so are the memories that make you laugh and have joy and feel loved and feel seen and feel appreciated. And so all I think about when I think about Dee and Carolyn is how wonderful they were and how lucky I was to be able to spend time with them.
Just have a comment. Obviously, this is a love fest for
Yes.
DeForest Kelley and Star Trek
Come on
in
up.
general. But I think it was such a great move, whoever decided when in the first Next Generation episode,
Yes.
when they had
Yes,
DeForest Kelley, he was like the perfect bridge.
absolutely.
Classic Star Trek that we all love. And
What is your name?
my name is Robert.
Robert
Yeah.
just talked about Encounter at Farpoint and the fact that Dr. McCoy was the absolute perfect bridge between the two. And that's another portrayal that to me shows the absolute mastery of DeForest Kelley as an actor. Because in 47 seconds, or maybe it's 37 seconds, you go from laughing to a tear. You're like,
And he's still irascible. He's giving
exactly.
Data a hard time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't see points on those there, but
I don't see no
just
points on
forgive
you
him,
as a
says-
boy, but you sound like a
Yeah,
Vulcan.
you take care of the
No,
ship.
sir, I'm an
You always
android,
take care of
almost
the
as
ship.
bad.
Just a great moment. Just-
Well, she's a new ship,
Yeah.
but she's got the right name.
Yeah.
You treat her like a lady,
Yeah.
she'll always bring you home.
Very
I mean, it was like,
Beautiful, right?
yes, that was DC Fontana.
Yeah.
Yep. DC Fontana had Dr. McCoy as a character. When she wrote about Dr. McCoy, she had him right. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite episode? with Bones?
I have several. Of course, they're all very, very much D heavy. City on the Edge of Forever. That was his favorite ensemble piece when he was in the hospital. He said, gee, I hope you can find City on the Edge of Forever for me on the tube while we're sitting here. And he saw it and he said, gosh, I remember it a lot differently than that. He said, the stuff was cut out of that I did that they didn't air. Because at one point in that show, there's a moment where you realize McCoy is falling in love with her too. And the line that was cut was as she was leaving the room that he was convalescing in, he said, wait a minute. And she turned around. She could have said yes. And he says, you got the biggest eyes I've ever seen, and just, he was falling for her too, which made it even more poignant at the end where they had to allow her to die. Do you know what you did? I know they were both in love with her and they both had Kirk let her go and McCoy probably would not have. McCoy would have sacrificed himself, not knowing the story, but he still would have done it. The other one was the empath where he gets all beat up and hung up and beat up and the empath, this extraterrestrial race is trying to find species that are so empathetic that they will die for someone else. And Jim happened to be an empath and they beat him up. They beat McCoy up really, really horribly. And then she's trying to take his pain. And he says, no, because he knew he was dying from what had happened to him, that the beating he had, he knew he was dying. And he says, I can't sacrifice a life, even if it's to save my own. And he pushes her away. Because he says, no, I'll go before I will do that as a doctor, My thing is do no harm. Let's see. Of course, the funny stuff, the shut up, Spock, we're rescuing you, and stuff like that. That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost, all the funny stuff. He was really the comic relief in so many. The thing, he wasn't just the comic relief, he was also the fulcrum on which much of the drama depended too. So he was really, really excellent in that role. And he had the opportunity to be Spock. And he realized, no, he there's no humor in Spock. Well, I mean, except, and he wanted something that had humor in it. And I think he chose wisely. He said nobody could touch Nimoy anyway. Nimoy was Spock. Yeah. So I'm trying to think other things, but yeah, almost anything. The interesting thing about McCoy is almost any time he came into the scene, you knew you needed to watch him because something was going to happen. He wasn't just like a bystander, something is hinging on this guy.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite? Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor, not a blank.
Not particularly. There are just so many of them.
Yeah.
Was he a stepladder at one point? Does that ring
Not
a bell?
an escalator.
Escalator.
Yeah. Damn it, Jim. And that was the other one, the other funny one where he gets spattered with a rock by the. Oh, and when he's trying to convince Natira to keep. Not is it Natira? No, he's trying to convince Eliane to keep the baby. The baby is mine. The baby is mine. And she goes, the baby is yours. And he goes, no. And yeah, there's just so much fun in that show. Anything else?
You were saying
Yes.
Oh, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, no.
There's so many moments. Like
Yes.
Tribbles where Spock and McCoy had so many great moments.
Absolutely.
Where, they're discussing the Tribbles and all. I know y'all know.
I wouldn't harm a hair in his head if I knew which end it
The way
was.
it goes,
Yeah.
I don't know much about these Tribbles, but I know that I like them more than I like you.
Yes.
then Spock is a good retort.
Yes.
Don't talk too much.
I know one thing. Yeah. I like these Tribbles more than I like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this shows is replete.
There's just way too many to even mention them all. They are just so much fun.
Before we go, can you pitch some of your other books? Or just
You know what?
rattle
I
off the
have a
titles?
book description back there of all the different ones. I'm transgender. I have a transgender journey. I was cosplaying as a female most of my life until I figured out what was going on. And I realized, no, I've been a boy my whole life. Oh, thank you. That'll help. I also have a 6-volume thing. After I wrote this book, the fans who read it came up and they wanted to know more and more and more and more. And finally they said, I want to know every interaction you ever had with these people, because they are they're such a hoot, you know? And so I actually went into all of my phone logs, because anytime they would call me, I would take notes on what we had talked about. I'm a writer. That's what you do, you know? And I went back into those phone logs and I went, they called me over 1,000 times. And I'm not a caller. I am not a caller. I never call unless I absolutely, need to call. The calls were all coming in my direction from them. And there were over 1,000 calls. And if I hadn't gone back into my journals and into those phone logs, I would have, it's amazing what you forget, even though you think you're having an important, interaction. I was reading my phone logs and going, I don't even remember. I mean, I didn't remember this until this moment when I read it again, that thing even took place. So the phone logs, there's a 6-volume set of phone logs back there that's more than 500,000 words of discussions of what we talked about in the phone logs. There's also a couple of extra visits in there that didn't make it into the book. Because they wanted everything I had ever done, with them. So I wanted to include everything as much as I could. Floating Around Hollywood is a book of humor. Well, this one's a book of humor most of the way through. And it's a book about what it's like to be a floating secretary in Hollywood, which is what I was for a while. It's kind of like Lucy Ricardo in Hollywood, all the stupid things I did that should have got me fired. That's what that's about. Let No Day Dawn That the Animals Cannot Share has just been expanded into an expanded edition. I have had another lifetime with animals, tame and wild. I mean, multiple, interactions with lions and tigers and bears and the whole 9 yards. And Lisa has created the covers for the expanded version, and it's back there. It's 3 times the size of the smaller versions. There are smaller versions of it, but the larger version is back there. Stagecoach is also Lisa's cover, is a guide for panicky presenters. So people who get nervous when they speak in public, it helps them get over that and view it in a whole different way. Yay Sayers, The Good Guides is a book I wrote about for teenagers, because I had yay sayers in my life. My mom and dad were scared to death I was going to starve to death as a writer, especially back in that day before the information age, before people needed content. They were mostly male writers. They were mostly historians, whatever. They were scared to death I was going to starve to death, and I didn't. But I had all of these wonderful mentors. I had teachers. I had a Pulitzer Prize winning author and Dee saying, you're a good writer, keep going. So I wrote a book called Yay Sayers, because a lot of times the people who are naysayers, it isn't that they don't love you, they're afraid for you. They don't want you to experience failure, or in some cases they're very, very needy and they don't want you to get beyond their ability to stay with them for the rest of their life. There's lots of reasons why people are naysayers that have very little to do with you and everything to do with them. And so I just wanted, this is a book of encouragement to say, the naysayers you can love and admire like I did my parents, but don't listen to them because they're afraid for you or whatever. And listen to those people who are in a position to know. And if they see that you are good at something and they encourage you to do that, they don't have to do that. The fact that they go out of their way to do that is huge encouragement. And I had naysayers throughout my life that kept saying, keep going as a writer. Become shamelessly, fearlessly you. Stop hiding in plain sight. Lisa did the cover to that. It's the title self-explanatory. It's I want you to read the back cover for that because that's a little more convoluted, but a lot of people are kind of afraid to show who they are for fear of, something shameful in their life. And most of the people who should be most ashamed are the least fearful of caring what anybody thinks. So don't let any sense of shame or whatever stop you from doing what you want to do. I did it much better than book than I did it just now, I promise you. Trailblazer is a guide for magnificent misfits because belatedly, not only did I find out I'm transgender, but I'm probably also autistic on the spectrum. And that is a helpful, encouraging roadmap for neurodiverse and creative individuals. And again, it's a book of encouragement. You are the way you are because if there weren't people like you, we probably would be still living in caves. If everybody thought exactly the same way all the time, we wouldn't have evolved in any way. It's the creatives. It's the people who say, hey, why don't we think of it this way? Why don't we try things this way? So that's what Trailblazer is about. So Freaking Fortunate is a fill in the blanks book. And I think especially for times like this, it's a gratitude journal like no other. It guides you to a greater appreciation of your lifetime, of your life, especially during these difficult times. It helps you identify those people who those people, places, and events that help you maintain and cope and continue to move forward. Several Sunspots and Stripes Rather, again, that's the free one if you buy any other title. And that's what it's like to raise and be raised by a wild African cat. It's a cautionary tale. If you ever think about doing that, you might want to read the book and go, okay, am I willing to give up literally everything I know about normal life to provide properly for this animal? Yeah, so that's most of it. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. So, help yourself, take a look, come talk to me, whatever you would like to do. And I want your information. Yeah, I do. I mean, if you have any other questions after you read the book or anything like that, I'd be happy to.
Well, I'd love it if you autograph this book.
You
already have.
I have autographed it, but I can personalize it to you if you want.
Autograph it, yeah.
Okay, and Walter, you want just your first name?
Sure.
And then someone